guarantees. We're pleased to welcome now Cheikh Taylor, chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party, also a representative for District 37, which includes Clay, Lowndes, Tibahaw County, serves as the vice chair of the House Constitution Committee. We get all that right, Mr. Taylor?
Yes, that's correct. District 38.
District 38. Okay, 38, so we got a new district number. Appreciate you pointing it out to us. So, all right, so we were just talking offline. You've been in this role as chair of the Democratic Party in the state of Mississippi for about 9 months.
That's
correct.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? Did you raise your hand for this, or were you?
Of course not. Of course not. Listen, the Democratic Party was hemorrhaging, and there was a executive decision by many of the committee members to change leadership, and I didn't campaign for it, didn't seek nomination for it. Someone thought that it was necessary to throw me a live hand grenade, and I caught it.
Okay.
And I'm glad I did so.
Okay.
Glad I did so.
So we were talking, it's a bit unique to serve both in the state legislature in a state and also serve as the chair of a party.
Sure it is. We just discussed that when I'm dealing with other Democratic chairs across the nation, that it is a unique opportunity for legislators to serve. And I think that is a huge advantage because we get a chance to actually see what it is to be a candidate. I'm a candidate. We get a chance to see how messaging can be impactful in legislation. So what's happening on the campaign trails when we're listening to the public and taking in views and comments and things of that nature about the importance of Medicaid expansion, the importance of a clean ballot initiative and things of that nature, we're able to take that message and be firm in our stance and why these things are necessary when we go back to the Capitol.
Okay. I think it's fair to say, you may disagree, and that's fine, that most people, when they think about the profile and the principles and the agenda of the two main parties, they sort of take that cue from the national level. Okay. That's what they see more, I think it's fair to say, than the sausage that gets made in the legislation at the state level. And that leads me to the question, do you feel like the Mississippi Democratic Party is closely aligned with the National Democratic Party? We could just look at the president. I mean, the president's a Democrat, obviously, and the Democrats control the Senate, have a small minority in the House, but they're basically in charge.
Well, this is the deal. The deal is, and in fact, we're preparing for our state convention on May 25th. So this Saturday, we'll have a platform agenda with issues concerning Mississippians that we'll take to the national, to the DNC, which will be in Chicago this August.
Right.
So the whole point is that every state has its nuances. Every state is different.
Sure.
And we want to make sure that the values of Mississippians are represented on the national level. I think in both parties we can agree that there's not 100%. The assumption that we all agree 100% with national agendas. But we are in support heavily with the president and the vice president. But we want to make sure that the issues of Mississippians are heard and included in the national agenda.
Okay. Speaking of which, you said you got the state convention coming up here pretty soon, and then the national convention in August, and that follows the Republican National Convention, which is slated for July. Just had the state convention. Are you going to be a delegate?
Yes.
At this point? Yeah.
Yes. Well, all party chairs are national.
I thought so. I wasn't sure if that worked the same way in the Democrat Party as well.
We are so excited. The last time it was COVID.
Right.
And, it's kind of hard to have a real good rally over Zoom.
Yeah.
But this time we get a chance to see it in person, get a chance to actually feel the energy of those who support Democratic principles and those who are aligned with the Democratic Party. We're excited about that because that's going to help push the agenda to turn Mississippi purple, if not blue.
Okay. So you were just talking about the agenda that you and other party leaders are working out in advance of the state convention, and I assume you intend to not only discuss that and present that, but you also said that you intend to present that to the national party leaders as well. Can you share anything with us about that?
Well, actually, those things actually come out in full detail on the 25th.
Okay.
And this is not me being disingenuous or trying to withhold information, but all 4 congressional districts, they have platform committees that submit agenda items and things of that nature. And those things will be fleshed out on the 25th.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Do you think the current president, Joe Biden, is going to be the nominee?
I do. Well, he doesn't have any competition. It's 4 years ago, I believe it was Bernie Sanders, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So unequivocally, he will have no competition getting there. There will be any vote will be ceremonial in that process, but he is our nominee.
We've got debates that appear to be scheduled that would feature the current president, Joe Biden, the former president, Donald Trump. Unusual in the modern era for those debates to be held prior to the conventions. First one coming up here in a little over a month, June 27th. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's necessary. People need to know who they're voting for. They need to know the not only nuances, but the differences, the fundamental differences of what these 2 presidents or former presidents are actually discussing. One thing that comes to my mind, and this may be a little controversial for some people on the call, but there was a sound bite from President Trump that said that he wants to restore immunity to police officers, and I'm a friend of police officers, and I'm wondering what this methodology really, really means. Because I don't think that good cops necessarily are looking for immunity. I think accountability is what good cops are actually looking for. And so I'm concerned that as a Democrat, as an African American, as a man, as a father, what the implications of this could actually mean, especially in the state of Mississippi.
So do you not feel like that it's possible that those two principles can coexist, that you can have accountability and some degree of immunity? Is that possible?
Some degree. Of course, we want our law enforcement officers safe. Now, that's a priority.
Yeah.
But, listen, we have our issues here in Mississippi. Just recently, you reported on the goon squad and things of that nature, which is listen, this is not the standard in Mississippi. I don't believe so. I don't believe that that this is something that is rampant in the state of Mississippi. But surely, if they were offered immunity, that may encourage bad behavior and also the assaults of more Mississippians. So that is concerning for me.
And I appreciate that. I think I can be honest in sharing that those of us on the right, we want our law enforcement officers to be accountable. We don't condone any sort of abusive behavior as well. But I also have this concern that without some degree of immunity, we already have a shortage. We have a difficult time, as you well know, recruiting folks into the law enforcement business, that it just makes it even more difficult.
Well, it's about pay, right? It's about pay. It's about training.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah,
sure it is. Sure it is. And it's about proper recruiting, of course.
Okay.
So this is not to diminish what good officers and those who are good public servants are doing, but definitely to thwart and to root out those bad actors and making sure that's not a part of the equation.
Okay. But it seems like, statistics show, I'm sure you're aware, that that's a small, tiny fraction when you look at the overall number of police interactions with the public. It's minuscule.
That makes all the sense in the world until it's your child.
Sure. Until
it's your family, until it's personal. And whether I don't think this is even a partisan issue.
Yeah.
When things affect us individually, they mean the world. When they don't affect us, sometimes individually, we can kind of explain those away. But I don't think any parent, any grandparent, mother, father, could tolerate any bad behaviors and bad actors who are acting in that manner.
Okay. All right, we're up against a break right here. You can hang around with us, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
We can. We got more to talk about.
Yes, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Cheikh Taylor, chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party, is our guest in the Element Wealth studio. We're stepping aside for a break. Element Wealth studio, we appreciate you joining us. We're talking to Cheikh Taylor, Mr. Chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party. So we had some, I think, good discussion there on the issue of law enforcement and kind of the views of the parties on that, and I guess just the governance, the oversight, the regulations that would apply to law enforcement community, not only in the state but in the country. And I think this all, you would agree, stems from mostly the George Floyd incident in 2020, where we had these calls for so-called defunding of the police, and some communities really went far out on a limb, so as much to even eliminate their police departments. And we didn't do that here in the state of Mississippi, but still some of that exists in the country today, although we're kind of see it moderate, or migrate, I should say, more back to the middle.
Well, listen, I think that to see a George Floyd occur real time in some of those cases, definitely repeated over and over again in these news cycles, was traumatic for many viewers. And I think that most folks had the wherewithal to say that could have been me, or it could have been my loved one. And so there was a shock across the country. And so those iterations of ideas of defunding the police and hey, listen, let's get away, I think those were highlighted probably more than the talks of, hey, listen, let's get more training, let's make sure there are repercussions for doing these things. So defunding the police, I don't think any sensible person, and none of that happened in any of the states. We all realize that we need law enforcement. I'm 50 years old, and when I call law enforcement, I'm calling them on my behalf to protect me, my property, and my family. And of course, we expect those things to happen. So this is not adversarial to law enforcement. But when we see bad actors in those manners, of course, that has to be a move, whether it's swift or pragmatic, to make real changes, real fundamental changes in how we interact with one another. We just talk about officer friendly, and sometimes good policing is actually community policing, where you're a partner and not just show up 4 cars deep, 5 cars deep, which is automatically a source of contention and probably resistance. So there's training that needs to happen on both sides of the coin, but we need to also make sure that when we do see these things, that we move swiftly and making sure that there's legislation, or there are things that are implemented, that those things don't happen again.
Yeah, I don't know anybody on either side of the aisle that opposes appropriate accountability for law enforcement.
Sure.
I think that's absolutely the case. I don't know anybody that again, condones police brutality, police abuse. But on the other hand, I guess I would ask you this. There are some communities, as you know, I think Oakland is one of them, that's got just a horrible crime problem, that have decided to dispatch social workers into dangerous situations when the calls come in to the police department, as opposed to armed police officers to perhaps quell those situations.
And I don't know much about that. I don't know much about Oakland.
Okay.
But I will say that I'm a proponent for, even in our criminal justice system, when we're talking about incarcerated individuals, that there is a high degree of mental counseling, a high degree of that type of social work that goes in there, because we have to question whether or not our current system is actually rehabilitating inmates. I think anyone who will come to this call would say that they may be a nonviolent offender will be worse off after 3 years of serving, and probably becomes a violent offender over the years because of the conditions of incarceration, especially in our prison systems.
Okay.
So yes, social workers probably do need to be deployed. I don't know about that situation in Oakland, but definitely in our criminal justice system, we should have a rehabilitation system so that they are not repeat offenders, and that they also have the proper identifications and mechanisms so they can become productive citizens when they leave.
Okay. And I think has there not some legislation introduced even in Mississippi to kind of change the techniques and the methodologies used as part of the incarceration process?
We're working on it. But listen, the problem is when it comes to incarceration is that, I think the statistics say that we actually per capita incarcerate more than China, more than a lot of communist countries here in the state of Mississippi. And in fact, as a legislator, every year we come and we do deal with enhancement bills to give another penalty. So we have statutes on the books about levels of incarceration as far as time is concerned. But then every year we come back and we add to that. So we have a hemorrhaging problem when it comes to economics with our prison system, because we know that we have to deal with parchment and other facilities. But when you give a person more time and more time and more time, then the likelihood of them coming out to be rehabilitated is far to none. So we have to make sure that the punishment fits the crime and that we're not tacking on and on and on, because I don't know the purpose of it. I don't know why we're doing that and why we're hell-bent on doing it every legislative cycle.
I just wonder if our incarceration rate is higher than many other nations just because we have more crime.
It seems that they deal with crime differently. For example, we can pivot very quickly to voting rights.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, we have 22 felonies that allows you to lose your voting rights. And two of them are very curious to me. One of them is tree larceny. And I know it probably sounds funny for a lot of voters to hear that. But if you're, and I don't condone anyone going on anyone's property to cut down trees, but why is that an issue to lose your voting rights, right? Another one is $100 bad check. That's probably happening in places like Walmart and your grocery store. It's a felony, and maybe it should be, but it also prompts you losing your voting rights. Now, chances are who's properly writing these bad checks? And in my mind, in my experiences, this is probably single mothers who are trying to feed the children. And yet we penalize them with the felony, incarceration at times, and then we strip them of their voting rights. So there has to be, and I think anyone can see, that there's an association with some minor criminal, nonviolent activities to stripping of voting rights.
So you think, are you suggesting, though, Representative Taylor, that stripping of voter rights is a cause of crime?
No. What
I'm trying to understand why we have this higher incarceration rate. I accept that, but I'm just wondering if that's a function of the fact that we have more crime being committed.
No, I'm tying the argument that why are we having nonviolent crimes?
Okay.
To strip us of our voting rights.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're advocating for restoration of voting rights for nonviolent crimes.
That's
and
right.
we've had legislation to do just that hasn't made it across the finish line, right?
It hasn't made it across the finish line, and to be honest, I'm on Constitution where we're dealing with some of those things.
Okay.
Also, too, we do know that there were at least 4 out of 17. There were 4 individuals who were vetoed.
Okay.
That they did not get their suffrage bill passed.
And I think it's required that each individual has to be included in a separate bill, right?
Yeah.
You need separate bills to restore the voting rights of individuals who have lost them as a function of committing.
I think you would agree this is the most convoluted process.
I was a little surprised to find that out.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's the most convoluted process. So for the listeners on call, you have to gain the attention of a state legislator.
Who has to sponsor a bill.
Who has to sponsor a bill for one person in their name. Then take it to the committee. The committee actually sees and reviews it, and then it's voted up or down. And then it still has the probability of being vetoed at some point.
Right.
Now, out of all the offenders who have submitted suffrage bills, the right to get your voting rights back, which are literally hundreds every year. On average, we do about 8, maybe 10
that actually pass.
Actually pass, and sometimes we don't take them up at all. So the process of someone who paid their debt to society, there should be automatic restoration of voting rights, especially for non-violent offenders, and that's what we advocate for.
We got a break right here, but if you can hang, we can keep talking. We'll find out if the governor explained, because I know he vetoed some of these. Did he provide an explanation for that?
To my knowledge, there has been no explanation at this point about the 4 that were actually vetoed. Yes.
We'll come right back, folks. We're in the Element Wealth Studio. We're visiting with Cheikh Taylor, chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party. So I would share to you that a concern people have, I think this is fairly pervasive, is that the rescission of voting rights serves as a deterrent to crime. In that, I think your point is, well, you've paid your debt to society and you've totally fulfilled that, and you didn't commit a violent crime that you ought to have your voting rights restored. But those on the other side would say, but yeah, that's a deterrent that if we lose that, maybe folks would be more inclined to commit crime, or it wouldn't stop them from committing crime.
I would submit to you that that's probably the last thing on the person's mind who's committing any type of criminal activity. In fact, there are studies that show that no matter how much time that person is given, that's not a consideration when they're going to commit that crime. What we're probably looking at more often than not is voter suppression, marginalizing voters, making it more difficult to vote. Listen, I'm intrigued by Australia. Australia is doing it the right way. And I know it might sound funny coming from a guy who looks like me and the chair of the Democratic Party. But Australia actually, for about a solid week or more, is more of a festival. This is an uplifting, engaging, music-filled celebration to go use your right to vote. But here in the state of Mississippi, I think we all can agree that it's a bit of drudgery. That while we have pride in our vote most often, that there are intentional stopgaps to make sure that it becomes increasingly more and more difficult each and every year. And this is one of those things that we can look towards very quickly and ask a very specific question. Why are we alienating those who paid their debt to society from voting? So if you commit a crime of embezzlement, should that take away your right to vote once you paid your debt to society? Listen, I don't think any of us have issues when it comes to violent offenders that may be in a situation where they're in conditions there is very difficult to rehabilitate certain individuals. Maybe so. But again, why is there a concerted effort to make sure you're stripped of these things? Because we do know that is not a deterrent. If I'm going to go rob a bank, I'm not considering whether or not I'm going to get stripped of my voting rights, and I'm probably not considering the amount of time I may get if caught.
Well, given the rate of recidivism of crime, I'm not sure that incarceration and just the other punishment serves as a deterrent. It doesn't seem that, and I could argue that, well, you maybe haven't paid your debt to society simply by being incarcerated and serving time. That part of your debt includes you've lost your voting rights. That's how you pay your debt.
Well, I would argue that it's not whether or not you paid your debt, it's the conditions that you endure while incarcerated. While you're incarcerated, if you're dealing with some of the worst conditions, the threat of violence every day, and I'm not saying that it should be Club Med where you go on a vacation, but surely if a nonviolent offender goes in there, somebody who did something very, very benign, take a loaf of bread to go feed your family, you stay in there for 2 or 3 years, you come out because of those conditions, and now you had to become a violent criminal to survive our criminal justice system. You carry that with you when you leave, and you carry those. Listen, we're all the products of our environment. If you're a college kid, you're a product of that environment. And usually these things are happening in the most formative times of your development. So your average person who's committing a crime is probably between the ages of 14 to 24. Usually you're in school, right? You're in college, you're in high school and things like that. You're getting your most formative education. But if we're subjecting our citizens to the most heinous acts during that time, that's what your education standard becomes. So yes, social workers are needed. Yes, those who are in the mental health business are needed so that we can counteract this environment that leads to recidivism, because now nonviolent criminals become violent because of the conditions that they're in.
So the data shows that individuals who were raised in fatherless homes have a higher prospect of committing crime, of dropping out of school, of really just entering adulthood without achieving their maximum potential, without really contributing to society, without being leading a productive, successful life. This is a huge problem in the state of Mississippi, fatherless homes and just the breakdown of the nuclear family. What do you think we ought to do?
Well, it's something that needs to be addressed. First of all, the fatherless child syndrome affects all of our communities, both parties. There's statistics here you find where these things are rampant everywhere we go. And there is a lack of leadership in our homes. Surely we cannot penalize single mothers, but we're moving into a country that oftentimes we're taking advantage of some things that may actually encourage fathers or disencourage some fathers to be around. These are, and this is through our court
such
system.
as what?
This is through for example, through our child support, and things of that nature. Now, I'm not advocating that no one should avoid paying child support, that no one should not be subjugated to taking care of their child. But, there are systems in place, especially in housing, public housing, that disencourages fathers to be present. They may be not able to be on the lease. Them combining two incomes.
Yeah, because they wouldn't be eligible for housing assistance.
They would not be eligible for housing assistance.
And other welfare programs.
So sometimes, and this is not and I don't want to do this in a broad brush, but some people may say, listen, I would take the stability of having a home, being able to provide for my children, but in taking that, sometimes you are actually agreeing to removing the father from that home and the effects of father present in the home.
Well, I hear you, and I know that that's certainly at play. There are a lot of folks out there that are gaming these systems, they're aware of all the criteria to be eligible to receive these benefits. But I just feel like, Mr. Taylor, that it's as much just a cultural problem.
It is.
And I think you're aware that it's more prevalent in the black community.
I don't know so. I can't.
The data says that.
Well, I'll have to see the data.
Okay.
What I see is that that all of our communities have high divorce rates.
It's a problem no matter what the race is of the people. But it just happens to be more prevalent in the black community. And unfortunately, it happens to occur at a higher rate in the state of Mississippi.
And that's an economic equation that we have to also address as well.
I think it's what's dragging down and causing us to have the lowest household income and per capita income in the country.
Well, I think that's actually due to economic opportunities. And listen, I will, being a legislator in North Mississippi, where we've seen economic booms, we've seen $2.5 billion investments in our local aluminum plant that guarantees jobs of $90,000 on average. Those families who have economic opportunities such as that and take advantage of it, and whatever education and training that comes along with that, won't be in that demographic. A lot of times we have to draw a clear line of economic opportunity, education opportunity, with the conditions of our community. Those who are marginalized and displaced oftentimes have that stigma, but At the end of the day, if we're talking about those who perpetrate crimes that are low income, that's a drop in the bucket to those who may be perpetrating those same crimes, who may be corporate Americans who actually are able to ride the generosity of the state of Mississippi and may be also bad actors.
Well, sure, and I don't know that anyone on the right side of the aisle condones that either.
Sure.
I don't think that they would give a pass to anyone that's committing a crime, no matter what their income level is, their position in life, their status. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at certainly violent crime in our nation, most of the time when you look at the folks that are committing those crimes, they come from broken homes. They come from dysfunctional homes. That's just a fact. Yeah. They don't follow the success sequence, which means that their probability of being a contributing, successful, productive adult is much lower because they don't follow the success sequence. They don't have the benefit of being raised with a father in the home that can mentor and guide them.
Let me say this, and I got to highlight Helen and Andre Taylor. My parents.
Okay.
Military background, 24 years of service in the military. My mother, master's degree, who's worked as a community servant, developing a nonprofit in Starkville that's been around for 50 years. Both pillars of society, both very impactful in my life. I wish that for most families.
Okay.
To have that type of nucleus, to have that type of investment.
We got a break. We can talk about it on the other side of the break. You can hang around?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Sure.
We got Cheikh Taylor, chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party. We're discussing all things political in the state of Mississippi with Cheikh Taylor, the chairman of the Mississippi Democratic Party. We appreciate Representative Taylor for joining us today. So we talked a lot about law enforcement, and before we went to break, we were just talking about the success sequence and the problem we have in our state with the number of fatherless homes and how that, I think, just contributes to just more challenges in society. Be it crime or falling short of economic potential, et cetera. You made the point we need more opportunity. I agree, and I think the state of Mississippi is doing a lot to expand our economy. You talked about the steel plant in your neck of the woods. We got AWS coming here. We got the big battery plant in Marshall County. The future's bright from that perspective, but we still got to get people motivated to get out and work as well.
Sure we do. And listen, as far as that's concerned, the working crisis, and this is just my personal opinion. This is not representing the party or anything along those lines, or even my district. But I really believe that there was a non-organized protest about the poor wages, minimum wages in the state of Mississippi. So those who see that $7.25 minimum wage, which Democrats have been advocating to raise for a very long time. It makes it very difficult. Listen, you want to know a crazy statistic? Well, actually, it's not even a statistic, it's a fact. As state legislators, we get paid about $8.25 an hour.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But you signed up for it. Nobody put a gun to your head and said, go be a legislator.
No, but we're also advocating, we just talked about advocating for pay increases of teachers, pay increases of law enforcement, because there's a metric there that talks about quality, that talks about level of education, training, and things of that nature. And we all, listen, we pay great money to some folks at the top of the food ladder to make just a handful of decisions a year. And listen.
Are we talking about in Mississippi specifically?
Well, sure. Anywhere in the country.
Okay.
Anywhere in the country. But more specifically, talking about economic expansions and things of that nature, when you increase the minimum wage, you encourage those to be a part of that equation. I went by, listen, sometimes I'm on a good health kick, right? So I go by one of the juice places, the frozen juice places, and that's $11.
Okay.
$11.
What do you mean?
Just getting a 32-ounce frozen drink, that's supposed to be healthy for you. $11 at $7.25. Yeah, that's almost 2 hours of pay. And so while things are increasing all around us, and sure, it may be a necessity to do so, but until we address that, we're ignoring the idea that we can have a greater economic impact by increasing minimum wages.
It's a million people in the country. It's 1.3%, the lowest in history, are earning federal minimum wage or less, the lowest in history. I feel like we're aspiring to earn minimum wage. We should be aspiring to earn far much more than minimum wage.
Sure, but that's our base.
I don't see it as a problem. I really don't. I mean, you and I probably have to disagree on that one. I don't see it as a problem. I think the market takes care of this. I think the minimum wage ought to be zero.
Well, you know what's interesting? Because of this non-organized protest, and that's just my way to coin it.
Yeah.
You're right. Many fast food places, many low-income paying industries did self-correct, but is it enough?
They're paying for it now. Of course, they're replacing these people with electronic and automated systems as well. We're seeing the ramifications of the federal minimum, of the California minimum wage, I should say, on fast food operations. I mean, it's $20 an hour, and so these places are shutting down, honestly. So now people are losing their jobs as opposed to working for, say, maybe $12 an hour.
But surely the suggestion is not that Mississippians don't want to work. I'm
not saying that at all, but we do have the lowest labor participation rate, but yet employers across our state are screaming for people.
Yeah.
Why do we have this imbalance?
Because we're still dealing with that minimum wage problem. And
I suggest that every job that's available is minimum wage.
Well, I tell you, in my travels as chairman of the party, dealing with other chairmen, and when you talk to the chairman of Minnesota and they say they have almost an $18 minimum wage,
right,
and most of our factories and plants who are paying that are regarded as great jobs.
Yeah, but those are likely more permanent, career-oriented jobs as opposed to youth, teenage-type jobs, which is what you typically find in some of these other environments.
But our workforce, listen, I remember a time when your grocery store bagger was 16, 17 years old.
Right.
We don't see that anymore, do we? We see full-fledged adults.
We should upskill them to take on better jobs. We got to go. Appreciate you coming in, Cheikh.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Coming right back.